Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar tonight. This is our first of 3 webinars in partnership with our great friends at F-Flat Books. Tonight, we're going to learn all about songwriting for all students. My name is John Malinzak. I'm Managing Director of Noteflight, and it is my honor to have these 2 amazing guest panelists, Sarah Gulish and Danielle Larrick, to share all of their amazing expertise. Couple housekeeping notes to begin. If you have any questions throughout or you want to react to something you'd like to ask the panelists, maybe a question on Noteflight Learn, the amazing integrated all-in-one solution for music education, composition, and performance assessment for all students, you can ask that in the chat. Myself and Danielle Herrera from Noteflight will be here to answer those type of questions for you. We will also be saving questions from the chat for the end, which I'll present to the panelists to be able to answer. So feel free to engage as we go. Also, everyone will get the recording emailed to you after, so if you missed something great, don't worry, you'll have a chance to watch it over and over again. And with that, I would love to present Sarah and Danielle. Please take it away.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for spending your evening with us, or if it's a different time zone, whenever you're watching this, we appreciate it. And I think, John, I'm going to need you to enable the screen sharing before we get started. So my name is Sarah Gulish. I am the co-founder and the CEO of F-Flat Books. And first of all, thanks to John and the whole Noteflight team for collaborating with us. We are going to be putting on some exciting webinars the next few weeks with some incredible educators who are also authors of ours. And so we are really looking forward to sharing this wonderful work with you. So tonight we're talking about songwriting for all students. And aside from running F-Flat Books, I'm also a public school music educator. So I've been teaching for the past 15 years, and I'll talk a little bit more about what I do in my day job. But before I get to that, I want to share a bit about what we'll be sharing with you tonight. So our essential question is really, how do we reach all students through the power of song? And specifically, how do we do that using tools such as notation and other tools that our students can access? Both Danielle and I have been avid Noteflight users for years. We use it with our students in and out of the classroom. And we'll be sharing some of that with you tonight. So we'll be going through 4 main sections tonight in our presentation. First of all, songwriting for the music educator, a bit about how we break down some of our hesitations and sticking points personally. Danielle is going to be talking about a songwriting workshop she does with her middle school musicians and how she moves students from independent to collaborative songwriting. We'll talk about other strategies for collaborative songwriting and how we can get students to write in groups in a variety of settings. And then finally, provide some extensions and additional support if you are looking to start your own songwriting journey or take your students on a songwriting journey. So let's go ahead and talk about what songwriting means for the music educator. And so I want to start off with a question. Have you ever written a song before? And I'm not talking about a Theory 4 project where you had to have perfect voice leading and realized figured bass. I'm talking about writing a song with lyric, melody, and harmony. And thinking back on your past experiences, how might they shape how you view the art of songwriting and what you think about songwriting in general and how you bring that into the classroom? I have been writing songs since I was very young, and it was because I had mentors and educators who encouraged me to write songs that I got so comfortable with the art of songwriting. Now I want to give that to all of my students. I think we also need to think, why should songwriting be part of a music education curriculum, and specifically in a field where we have gotten very focused on replication in most of our expressions of music education? How can we also promote creativity and personal expression? So I have a student this year. She's going into music education. She's going to be going to music school next year. She's a senior. And this was the first year that she's ever written a song. She's played in all of our ensembles. She's taken a ton of music courses, and she's taking my class this year. And I asked her to tell me about what this journey has been like. She said that creating and performing her own music feels different because it comes from her, and that she can connect with every word and every sound. And I found that to be true, that through songwriting, students are empowered and they do develop autonomy as musicians. And we'll give you some examples of that later on. So tonight we're going to talk about exploring, playing, creating, how we make musical playgrounds. We're going to talk about how we can practice and model what we want our students to do, which might be uncomfortable at times. And just as we believe every student can be a songwriter, we also believe that every person listening to this or watching this, and even for ourselves, that we can be songwriters too. And if you want to know more about how to explore a personal journey of songwriting, we do have a resource called Songwriting for Music Educators, which we're happy to share at the end of this presentation. So we do want to talk about notation because we will be connecting some of this work to Noteflight and to using notation with our students. And so Danielle and I have similar philosophies when it comes to notation. And I do want to say that this isn't a tutorial on how to use Noteflight. We're not even really going to take you through how we introduce it to our students, but we're going to show you what possibilities it can open for creative expression. We do believe that notation is a form of sound preservation. It is one of many. It's meant to communicate a nuanced musical thought. So it can't tell us everything, but it can tell us a lot. But we also believe that notation can be a playground for expression so that students can really go into a program like Noteflight and they can play and they can make even when they have little guideline. And we'll show you some examples of that. We believe that it is not the only way to preserve sound, and we like using it in conjunction with some other tools. We also think that it can't be an exact representation of nuanced musical thought, and for that reason, we do encourage students to record themselves and to use other means to preserve the songs that they write. And then finally, we never want notation to be limiting. We always want it to open doors for creativity, not for students to think that their creativity can only be expressed in one way. So now I am so excited to pass the baton over to my dear friend, Danielle Larrick, who started our music teaching journey together, and she's going to talk to you about how she approaches songwriting with her students.
Thank you so much, Sarah, and thank you to Noteflight for having me here this evening. It's wonderful to be here with everybody and with F-Flat. My name is Danielle Larrick, and I teach 7th grade and 8th grade general music as well as chorus. And so I wanted to talk to you tonight a little bit about my journey with songwriting with my middle school musicians. So one of the most important things, and I wanted to kind of piggyback off of what Sarah said quickly, I am a new songwriter myself. So aside from what I had to do in college, I am kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to songwriting from Sarah. In fact, I took her songwriting course last year and over the summer and just wrote my own first song, original lyrics and everything. So there are some things that I have as a new songwriter really carried over into my classroom with my middle school musicians. But I think that these things can be carried over into any age and any type of student musician that you're working with. So the first, and I think that we do this already as music educators, but to really make sure that you have a space of safety and trust. Know it's okay for your students to try something new and let them know that as they begin their songwriting journey. Create alongside of your students. So in both projects that I'm going to share with you this evening, I really try to create with them and let them know that I'm going through that process and we're working through it together. This is not original to me, and perhaps you've heard it before, but I love sharing this with my students that mistakes are really just mistakes. And if something doesn't turn out the way we expect it or the way we plan it, we try again and we learn from that and we continue improving. And I really try to emphasize with my students that they are all musicians and songwriters. One of the first things sometimes I hear coming into my classroom is, oh, I'm not good at music. I can't write a song. And I really try to get in the mindset of my students and share with them that they are all musicians. And I use that vocabulary and terminology with them as we are songwriting so that they really assume the identity throughout the course of our project. So this is a newer project that I started. Again, it's in the process, but I saw such great things with this, and I call it the Songwriter Mindset Project, if you will. So obviously one of my first goals is to encourage my musicians to think as songwriters. We explore songwriting through a variety of interactive activities and of course showcasing their final product. So here are sort of the overall steps. First, we establish the mindset. So we do that through exploring what it's like to be a songwriter. We listen to a podcast, we look at an interview, we watch Maggie Rogers and Pharrell Williams. Many of you maybe have seen this, where they're going through sort of her musical journey and he's giving her feedback. So we get what that feeling is like to be a songwriter and to be in those shoes. We then brainstorm, and I have to credit Sarah for this because I went through this activity with her during my course last summer, and I thought it was so great because the emphasis was not so much on choosing musical aspects to determine what you were going to compose, but just sort of a free-flowing, guided brainstorm that then led to musical aspects. So it took the emphasis away from theory and got us right into that brainstorm. Then I give them time to songwrite, and I give them some basic guidelines, but I really let it open to what they want to do. We focus mainly on rhythm first, and then we use that in Noteflight, and we build out our melody and just moving the notes. We have an opportunity for peer review so that they can give each other structured feedback and meaningful feedback. And then at the end, we do our sort of branding with a cover art piece and a song release, and releasing it out into the class and giving students an opportunity to give positive feedback and class shout outs to each other. And we finish with a sort of reflection component where they do it through a podcast. And they talk about their experience as a songwriter and what that was like to create in Noteflight. And I also offer extensions for students, which you'll see here in a moment. So I want to show you 3 examples of project results and what students came up with. And I love these 3 projects because they're all successful, and they're all successful in meeting students where they were. So here's one example of a great melody using some of the context that I gave them, but really pretty much all on the students' kind of own. So this student is a beginning songwriter, not a lot of background in music aside from school music. And so she is sort of a new music maker, a new songwriter in that sense, but did a wonderful job composing a really great melody. We'll look at a second example. This student plays a few instruments, is a member of chorus, and they went on to add in some extensions in some other parts. And then the third example is a student who previously took some piano lessons, but she really wanted to create a song that she could then transfer onto the piano and actually learn to play. So this is a little example of her song and her performance. So these are all equally successful results, but I love that this project meets my students where they are and really gives them something that they can latch onto and that they can learn from. This was just a reflection after we were done. This was a quote from one of the 7th grade students who had went through the process. I found it fun that we could express ourselves in the safest and most creative way possible. It's not a lot of words, but I really think it speaks volumes to what they experience after going throughout the process. The second song, or second project, I should say, that I want to highlight is something that I do with my 8th grade choral students, and we basically compose a graduation song. So some of our goals are to explore through both independent and collaborative songwriting, experience songwriting in formal and informal ways, and showcase their process and the final product at the concert. So here's kind of an overview of our process, and I won't get into every little step, but we start out with lyrics because most students, when I ask them to write down some ideas given a topic, they can come up with at least a few lines. So we start off with lyrics, And then we continue on and we kind of assess what we like and what we don't like, and we vote. So I put anonymously up the lyrics, and the kids get to choose which ones they really like, what fits with our topic. And then we choose like 6 or 7 kind of sets, and they become the lyrics for our song. From there, we get into the bulk of the composing. And what I love about this stage is that it's both formal and informal in a sense, because students can compose in any way they want. Many of my students are familiar with Noteflight because they use it quite frequently in class. So a lot of them love to go in and compose and edit as they go, but some students are more comfortable using their voices. And so they'll get out their phones or their laptops and they'll compose in that sense. And then we work to transfer it into more of a formal notation. Then we go through and we assess and arrange. Now, when I did this the first time, I helped out, but this would be a great opportunity if you have students that might want to take a leadership role or have more of a musical background to go in and actually arrange it themselves using Noteflight. Then we do a collaborative revision, and you'll see an example of this in the following slide, but we go through and we decide what we like and we don't like. And then we go through and we just present it. We work on practicing it and putting it up and putting it out for our audience to see. So this is just kind of a thought process for you and something that I had to discuss with my students, and that is process over product. When we started this, they were excited, and as we got into it, they're thinking, wow, I don't know if we have a full song. And I had to explain to them that they surely do have a full song, but it might look different than what they're used to sort of seeing or experiencing. So these are just sort of that process in pictures for you so that you can see kind of how we worked and how we put this together. And then this is the final result. So after all of that has kind of come to fruition and we've worked through it, this is just a sample of their final composition. And this is what one student had to say about the project. It has also assisted me personally to understand the music better because I had to create my own piece of art based on the way I interpreted someone else's piece of art. And so they took what they've used throughout their choral experience and used that to create something original and unique to the group themselves. So I'll turn it back over to Sarah to talk a little bit, kind of transitioning, talking about composing and songwriting in a choral space to some collective songwriting activities.
Absolutely. Thank you, Danielle. And I'm going to talk about 3 ways that I approach collaborative songwriting within a group. I should say that I am a high school teacher, as I mentioned before. I teach in 3 main formats. So I teach in an ensemble format. I have a string orchestra that I work with every day of about 60 students. I also teach a course called Collaboration and Creativity, and it's a required graduation course. So every kid in the school takes it. It is co-taught with me and an art teacher, which is pretty cool. I'm very grateful to have that opportunity. And every student in that course writes a song with me. And so at some point in their high school career, every student will write a song. And I find that so exciting. And then finally, I teach in our guitar program. So I teach beginning guitar and a music production course, and I'll show examples from all of those in a bit. So I'm going to share 3 approaches that I use in my classroom. The first is a build a song that we do as a full group. The second has to do with playing with both sight and sound. And then finally, lyric driven songwriting. So let's start with build a song. So this came about when I was teaching my beginning guitar class and we were starting songwriting, and they were really overwhelmed with the idea of starting a song from scratch and just going for it. And so I tried to find a way to collectively come up with a song as a group in a way that felt like it was low pressure compared to coming up with an entire song. So in terms of an overview of this, all parts are added sequentially. So they're added one by one, and each person contributes one creative choice. I've done this activity with music educators. I've done it with graduate students and undergraduate students and my high school students. And no matter what the level, we can make it work. You can also do this with your elementary kids, and I'll share some ideas for that in a bit. And then there's two really main goals. Like I said before, we want to show that the creative process isn't so scary, that there is a way to approach it. And then we also want to build community. So let me show you what build a song could look like. And I'm actually going to grab my guitar and do some demonstrating. So with the build a song, I really try to scaffold this activity to wherever my learners are. So if I'm working with a guitar class, I'll have them also playing guitar with me while we build. If I'm working with my general music class, I might give them something to do like tapping on their desk or just doing something musical while we're building. You can also give as many or as little options as you'd like, depending on who your learners are. So the goal for this build a song is that each person only has to answer one question. And so all you're responsible for is one element of the song. I always start with chords. And so if I were doing this with my guitar students, I would say, name a chord that I should start with. Let's say they said G. That's the first chord of our song. Now, if you're doing this with elementary kiddos, you could give them options. You could say, we're going to be using G, C, D, and E minor, and pick one. And they pick the starting chord. So I go around the room until we have 3 chords, and we just use that as the basis for our song. So for our sake today, we'll pretend that we're using G, C, and E minor. So those are the chords for our song. Now we need some type of tempo. So is it slow? Is it fast? Somewhere in the middle. And then rhythm. So again, if I'm working with my guitarists, I'll have them come up with a strumming pattern, but you might also just ask them to characterize how they want the song to feel or how they want the mood to be overall. The next question I ask is, what should our song be about? So now we have the tempo and the rhythm, we have the chords, but what are we going to sing about? And by the way, when I do this with my guitar students, I make sure that I play the whole time because I find that there's something incredible about building a song and keeping the music going while it's happening. So a lot of times my students will want to sing about lunch or being hungry because they're always thinking about food, but we also sing about serious things sometimes, and it's really cool to see what ideas they emerge. So let's assume that one of the students picked lunch as the topic. Then the next person's job is just to come up with one verse lyric. Now, this doesn't have to be mind-blowing. I tell them just to say something about the topic. So let's imagine they said something like, I'm so hungry, I can't wait till it's noon. That's our first line of lyric that goes over the chord progression we've built. Now, here's the cool thing. If I'm working with students who are really comfortable using their singing voices, which often I find the younger they are, the more comfortable they are, I'll ask them to come up with a melody that works with that lyric. When I'm working with my beginning guitar students or my general music kids, most of them aren't comfortable singing. So I will just improvise some made up melody using whatever lyric they give me. So if they gave me a lyric saying, I'm so hungry, I can't wait till noon, perhaps I'll do something like this. I'm so hungry, I can't wait till noon. That's the first line of our song. And then we'll go around until we have 4 lines of lyrics for a verse, some type of melody, and then the final closing part of our build a song is we come up with 1 line of lyric that embodies everything we've just sung about. And then I do try to get them to sing. This is kind of like our rally cry or our anthem. And what I find by the end of this process is we're having a lot of fun. We're usually laughing. And we have a song, and students have written their first song. So now there's a lot of ways that we can extend the build a song. We can connect what we've made to notation as a type of sound preservation. We can also create lead sheets for our class song. I usually do this pretty early in the semester so that it can be a song we come back to over and over again just to sing for fun. I also like to demonstrate taking something that we've created by ear and putting it onto notation. So for example, I was doing a workshop a couple of months ago, and while students were doing the build a song, I was in Noteflight in a different browser notating it for them. And at the end of the workshop, I was able to say, look at what you've made. This is your song. This belongs to you. And how powerful for those students to see how their creative choices could be something that was tangible and something that was visible to them that was not before we were together. I also find it's a great way to involve improvisation. So with my beginning guitar students, that might be making up a riff while we're going through the progression. or doing some type of melodic improvisation with their voice as they're coming up with lyrics. This is also a great way to get students into songwriting and then to have them do the same exact process in small groups of, 3 or 4 students, and then finally as individuals. And by the time they get to the individual process, it's far less nerve-wracking than when I would just throw them into it without any warning. So let's talk about sight and sound. Music is an oral language, but we assign so much of its meaning to what we see. And so how can we play with both sound and sight to create meaningful songs? And in this example, I'm going to show how I create musical playgrounds with my students in digital audio workstations, and how they also use Noteflight as a musical playground to create original songs. So this is an example of how we can use sound first. So in sound first, I want students to collaborate either in real time, so playing instruments, singing, messing around on digital instruments to create music together, or to create music in a digital audio workstation. This semester, we're using Soundtrap because most of our students are remote. So our first focus with this is just some song structure and harmony. The lyric and the melody usually follow after we've set sort of the stage for our playground. And then finally, there's a transfer to notation that can happen so that others can play the song. And the goal is that songwriting, again, happens in this, what I'm calling a musical playground, and students use their ears before they use their eyes to see what they're doing. So here's an example. This comes from a group of students in one of my general music classes this year. And one of the things that I love about this is that this group of students ranges from the student I told you about at the beginning of this webinar, who's a senior. She's going into music education. She took AP theory. And then you have a student who is taking his first music class ever, aside from general music in elementary school. He's never used a DAW before. He's never written a song before. And they're playing around in this, software to create something unique to them. So here's a little bit of her song. That this group played is one student said, I'm going to make a beat. I'm going to create the rhythm and the percussion for this. Another student said, okay, I'm going to come up with a ukulele part. And then my student who's going into music said, I'm going to work on some type of keyboard part that's MIDI. Now, the really cool thing about Soundtrap, if it is something you use, or even if you get free versions from your students, which I do, is that they can actually take this and transfer it to Noteflight. So they can take their MIDI music and put it to notation, which is so empowering for kids who don't know how to read music, like my student who created this song, but now they can see what their music looks like in notation, and it can be played by others. Let's talk about using sight first. So what if we start with notation as our musical playground? First, I just want to say you should let your kids play. If you haven't, just let your kids play in Noteflight. It is so much fun for them. And I find that I am teaching my kids less and less about how to use the software, because I'm realizing that when they just play, they figure a lot of things out. I always recommend providing age-appropriate scaffolding for whatever you're doing, and that you're really letting students play each other's songs as they're creating them. So again, collaboration for lyric and melody can be really helpful. I just find that's where students tend to be the most insecure. And so working within a group can help with that. And again, as I said in the beginning, we use notation as a vehicle for expression. So through the act of play, students end up learning some pretty cool theoretical concepts. We were just talking about that in class today. One of my students said that through trial and error, she figured out how 16th notes operated in this one song. And it's because she was playing in Noteflight. And I think that's so cool. So here is an example of a student who used Noteflight as a musical playground. She wrote a song which she entitled Greek Life. The student is Greek. And she wrote a song for piano, but she doesn't play piano. So she passed it to another student who does play piano and said, can you bring my song to life? Can you play it for me so I can hear what it would sound like on the piano? That student not only played it, she created this video for her, and this was the end result. pretty cool. Again, I did not tell her what to write. I didn't tell her what key to write in. She started playing, and this is the melody that came out of that session. This is another student example. One of the really cool things about Noteflight Learn, and the reason that I love that so much specifically, is because students have accounts. They can go in and compose whenever they want. I was shocked when I realized that some of my students were going home on the weekends and composing music. I mean, what a cool way to spend your time. And so I have some students who use it as their playground regularly. This is one of my students, Jasmine. She is a violinist, but through Noteflight, she's discovered all of these sound worlds that she loves. And so this is one of the pieces that I found in her playground. I found it on her Noteflight Learn account, and I said, can I share this at my Noteflight webinar? And she said yes. So this is Forest by Jasmine. One of the other things that I love about doing these types of activities is it really opens my eyes to who my students are holistically as music makers. So instead of seeing a student as first chair violin or third violin, I see them as these music makers with all of these various strengths and weaknesses that they bring into the classroom. So let's talk about lyric-driven songwriting. I usually begin with lyrics in two conditions and sometimes in other reasons, but these are really the main ones. When I'm working with new music learners who are uncomfortable doing anything musical and I'm trying to ease them into it, I do give them sometimes a springboard where they can do some creative writing and then turn that into a song. And finally, when we're tackling expression based on a specific prompt. So we do this in my creativity and collaboration class. We have a protest unit. And in the protest unit, we really try to get students to create art and create a song about something they care deeply about. And so when I work with students to write lyrics, I find that it's helpful to help them to develop what I call a lyrical palette. So just like artists will paint from a palette and they'll choose all of their colors, if students sit down and look at a blank piece of paper and I say, write lyrics, they usually don't know where to start. But if I say, we're going to create a lyrical palette and then use that palette to choose what you're going to say, they have a much easier time. And I learned this by trial and error. So I did not do this from the beginning of teaching songwriting. So here's an example of a student who is writing in my class. So the first prompt is, tell me about an issue you care about. Then I have them write 5 adjectives about that issue, 2 moods that they feel about that issue, and then I ask them to do a free form expression where they just say everything they're thinking about that issue at the time. And we might have students write about school-based issues like midterms, which are going on right now and are highly stressful, or we might have students write about global warming. We might have students write about past trauma that they've never shared with anyone before. That just happened a couple of weeks ago where students were writing about mental health struggles that they wanted help with. And so through this process, they come up with a lyrical palette that they then turn into what I call intentional lyrics, where they're being selective about their words so that they have the greatest impact. Once they do that, they can then take their lyrics to another software, so they can take it to Soundtrap or they can take it to Noteflight and turn it into a song. I do believe that when students view the music classroom as a music laboratory or a playground, they can take charge of their own learning. They can improvise, they can experiment, and they can play. It's not just me telling them what to do, it's them discovering what musical possibilities are there and what they can express through song and through the power of songwriting. So let's talk about some extensions. Here's my first question. Do you already have students who write songs? And the answer is yes. I guarantee that there is at least one student in your care who has written a song before. So this is a story I'm going to share. This is from 4 years ago. I had a student named Alex, and he came to me in December. He was a cellist in my orchestra, and he came to me in December, and he played a song he wrote on guitar. And it was so good. And he told me that he had never sung in front of anyone before. And so I tried to encourage him to sing it for people. But we also had a Pops concert coming up in February. And so I said, Alex, I'm going to give you this website called Noteflight. I want you to go home and I want you to arrange this song for our orchestra and we'll play it with you. And he kind of looked at me like I was crazy, and I didn't think he was actually going to do it. But we came back to school January 2nd, and he said, Dr. Gulish, I'm going to show you the Noteflight that I made. He created this arrangement for our orchestra. It wasn't perfect, but it was a jumping off point, and then we worked together to finish it. And this video is the first time he's ever sung in front of a group. It's the first time he's ever played a song that he's written. And now this kid is a junior in college and he's studying music. He's studying production engineering and he posts songs all the time online. But this was the first time that his song became a reality because others played it with him. So this whole experience and this whole project really sparked something in my mind. Here is a student who is playing a song that he's written by ear. He doesn't have it written down anywhere, but he turned it into notation that others could then perform with him. So it got me thinking, how could we use this example to connect songwriters to our music program? Or another way to ask that is, how could we connect informal learners, students who have participated in music outside of school, who have maybe learned by ear? How can we connect them with our more traditional ensembles or our formal learners? And so this past year, we decided to host a songwriting competition. I put it on the morning announcements and I just said, anyone who wants to enter can enter, send your song, send your lyric sheet. And students came out of the woodwork, students I had never met before who were not taught to write songs. They had just found a way to create music as a type of personal expression. And so this is an example of one of the songs that we received from a girl named Sophia. And again, she's not one who's ever performed her songs in front of anyone before. You can even see in this video, she wouldn't even aim the camera on her. She had it on her ceiling because she was nervous to record this and sing it. And you can see that she doesn't know exactly what chords she's playing, but she knows the names of the notes. And so she wrote those down with the lyrics that she created. There's more than a crush, more than a love, you're more than I could ask for, you're more than I imagined, you're more than I could be, more than I could say. Words take me back. I was lost in the cold, I was alone, but you came around and saved me with your love. Lost in the cold, I was alone, but you came around and saved me with your love. We were born in love, we were singing the song, we were always in love. We were born in love, we were born in love, we were So not only did I hear that and go, wow, this girl's incredible, I immediately played it for the choir director and said, get this girl in choir because she can sing. But what is so cool about this is my student Alex, who showed me that kids write songs and that we can involve more kids in the songwriting experience, has made me take someone like Sophia and find a way to connect her with that. So now the winners of our songwriting competition are going to be performing their songs with our orchestra. So we are working on arranging them for our orchestra with the songwriter's input. We also have an artist in residence coming in. And the goal is that we'll perform it at the end of this year or next year, depending on what happens with the school year. So what else could we do with these songs? And now the things that I'm going to list are things that I've tried, things that Danielle has tried that we found to be extremely beneficial for our students. The first is you could have an album release. This could just be in the class or it could be outside the class. There's some great music hosting websites like Bandcamp where you could have students record their songs and have a record release party. They could even make their own album art for it. You could take students to a professional studio. We do this every spring with my advanced guitar class, and they record songs that they've written. I use my PTA and I use other fundraisers to raise money for this experience. There's something so incredible when I see my students working with a professional engineer, hearing themselves in a monitor, and realizing that their songs are important and powerful, and they can hear it coming back at them. You can also go out into the community. So find a local coffee shop or find a local business that's willing to host you and your students and have you showcase your songs. And I know, Danielle, you've done this in the virtual space too.
Yes, last spring when we were quarantined and we were all learning remotely, I had each class select a project that they had worked on. So it could be a song that they wrote or could be a separate music project. And we put them all together in a slideshow that we were kind of responsible for. And then we invited the students and their families. We made up sort of a digital invitation, and we invited families to log on at a specific time. And we were able to share their songs that they wrote and composed throughout the year or throughout the trimester. And we got great feedback from the parents, and we've been actually needing to do it for a long time. And it was kind of a great excuse because it was digital and it was virtual, and we had a lot of people in attendance that might not have been able to otherwise make it. So that was really a great experience, and planning to do it again.
I think the virtual platform can also help students who are afraid to share their work. For example, I see that there's over 100 people on this webinar. I can't see your faces. I can't tell if you're enjoying it or not. So I'm just going to assume that you are. And I think sometimes for students, when they're performing for the first time, there's something that is comforting about playing and not necessarily having to look at all of their audience members. And so it's a great option whether you have to be virtual or not. At our school, we have a morning show that's filmed. And so we started a Friday Live where students can go on the morning show on Fridays and play their songs. And that's such a fun way to show them to the other students. What if your formal concerts included original songs? What if those original songs became arrangements for your large ensembles, or even just lived as original songs performed by students who wrote them? How might that change how people viewed your concert spaces or the way that you celebrate student work? And finally, what do your students think? I guarantee if you start writing songs with your students and you give them a space and you say, what should we do with these songs? They will have some incredible ideas. As you can see from this presentation, almost everything Danielle and I shared came from our students. We tried something, it failed, our students showed us a better way, and we followed their lead. And the final question I have for you is, if you embrace songwriting, if you start writing songs, if you consider yourself a fluid and creative musician, some of you probably already do, but if you haven't yet, how might it change you to become a songwriter, and how might it change your classroom to hear the songs that your students want to share? Thank you so much for being here and listening. This was such a pleasure. If you want to get in touch with Danielle or me, we would love to chat more with you. We're passionate about everything we shared. You can email us. You can also follow us. We're pretty active on Instagram. You can follow me at FLAT where we post all of our company information. And Danielle is always sharing tricks and tips at Musical Middle. So thanks again, John. And we look forward to hearing what you all have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah and Danielle. That was absolutely fantastic. There's so many wonderful ideas. We're going to start talking some questions here, but for those of you who have watched this, either live or recorded, thank you so much, and we really appreciate you.